So you have all this momentum from passing, 3 bills in a row now. What are your next steps looking like to move on to that next piece in Oregon?
So we wanted to continue to build on the authority. We wanted to, by the 2019 legislative session, we had the 2018 Farm Bill passed and signed into law. So we wanted to update our program, ensure that Oregon would be ready to submit a plan to USDA. We knew we needed specific authority to comply with some of the requirements for the Farm Bill that we did not have yet in place. We had experienced some issues with manufacturing and transportation and different protections for our licensed handlers and what was happening between manufacturing facilities. And we also wanted to provide as much support for our hemp licensees and our hemp growers through a commodity commission. So we went into the 2019 legislative long session with very big goals, and we had a very large piece of legislation that we were working on. And unfortunately, during the 2019 legislative session, and actually again in the 2020 legislative session, we had walkouts within the Oregon legislature. And so the bill that we were working on in 2019, we weren't able to get that past the finish line because we had our session end early, and we had a lot of timing that we could have been working with committees. They weren't meeting anymore. And in 2020, we were very, very close to getting these similar pieces of legislation passed. We actually had secured language protecting 1% hemp in 2020. We had our Commodity Commission bill, and it was at the third reading of the Senate. It was a House bill, third reading of the Senate. We were 3 bills away from our bill being read and walkout. Wow. So that one got pulled. Our House bill was ready on the House floor for its first full floor vote. Walkout. So 2 sessions in a row, we were not able to accomplish anything, but it was completely out of our hands and not anything to do with our subject matter, but just the political climate of what was happening in Oregon.
2 walkouts in a row and then a pandemic must have thrown quite the wrench in things.
I mean, just a little bit. So pandemic hits, and also different things are happening within the industry. We have 2018 Farm Bill passing. We have states coming online. We have thousands of growers all over the country growing hemp. In Oregon, we had 1,900 growers within our program. So really massive exponential growth, not only in Oregon, but nationally. And so now the market, which, these farmers were making very significant profits and really thriving. That's why we saw some of these very large contracts. We saw these very large manufacturing facilities coming online. But with this mass production, right, the demand is there, but the supply became oversaturated. And so, of course, that led to a decline in price, a decline in value, and it caused several farmers and manufacturers to pivot, whether that meant pivot out of the industry completely or to pivot to other products. So we start seeing not only in Oregon, but nationally, a change from the predominant CBD-focused market to other cannabinoids, both minor cannabinoids like CBG, CBC, CBN, but also the start of intoxicating products, so Delta-8. And that was really the first isomer that we saw really hitting the market. And of course, now we've seen a myriad of other isomers, but it was really that Delta-8 that started that conversation. And so specifically in Oregon, we have folks that, really were pushing the bounds of things. And because what was previously established both in law and in policy was that if it came from hemp, that it was hemp, we did transition, given the federal authority in rule in 2019 and into effect in January of 2020, a total THC standard, both pre-harvest and post-harvest. And even though those rules were in place, some folks were still trying to put higher concentrated products into the general market. So OLCC found these products on the general market. They saw that some of these products were mislabeled, but they also saw that several of these products had higher concentrated THC than what was even sold in the dispensaries. So now OLCC is worried because who's accessing these products? What oversight is there? The marijuana industry is upset because it's competing with their marketplace.
Right.
Unfortunately, start seeing unlawful marijuana production within the hemp license program. So folks saw that there was a lack of oversight, a lack of inspections occurring in certain areas within the state, and they got really creative and they decided that they were going to go and get hemp licenses, even though they were growing adult use cannabis. And now we had even more concerns coming not only from marijuana licensees who were going through this full license system with applications and very high licensing fees and security and tax obligations, and folks circumventing that. So we have them coming in, and now we have law enforcement very concerned about what's happening in their jurisdictions, issues with water, issues with environment, issues with labor. So we go in to the 2021 legislative session. Hemp industry is still trying to accomplish getting the authority for ODA to submit our state plan to USDA.
Right.
Because the last two sessions we weren't able to accomplish that. We're still trying to get our Hemp Commodity Commission. And now we are faced with unbelievable opposition.
Yeah.
There were several bills that were attempting to very negatively influence the hemp industry. There was a new representative. She had partnered up with law enforcement, and they actually attempted to allow law enforcement to come onto any hemp licensed location at any time that they want without any search warrants.
Seems like that's a violation of some rights there.
Just a few. And so, we were able to engage DOJ with that, and we shut that bill down effectively. There were certain counties that wanted to see manufacturing of hemp materials shut down in their counties. We were able to stop that. Big thank you to Farm Bureau for their collaboration with us on that. And then there were marijuana bills working on their policy. We had our hemp bills. There were Senate bills. There were House bills. We're all pushing for all these different things. Like OLCC wants certain enforcement. Law enforcement wants certain enforcement. OLCC wants particular regulations. Their licensees want things. We want things. So it was very contentious, but also everything was virtual. So we weren't in the Capitol able to meet and sit down and have the conversations and work things out the way that we had in previous sessions. So we were having virtual meetings, but it's still not the same as being in person. And so middle of the 2021 long session, we had a very clear understanding, everyone, that we were getting one bill and we had to work together. And not everyone was going to get everything they wanted, and it was a major compromise. But what many say is that the bill that we received at the end, given what happened in the beginning of session, how we started session, was an absolute miracle. And if you watch the whole process, I think you would concur. If you look only at the end result, probably not as happy. Right. But what came out of the 2021 legislative session, one was House Bill 2284, which actually created the Hemp Commodity Commission. Then House Bill 3000, which was the omnibus cannabis bill. So just to take one brief moment to discuss the Commodity Commission, we had attempted that 3 times over 5 years. The first attempt to accomplish the Hemp Commodity Commission was just a simple listing of hemp within the Commodity Commission list, not updating any of the authority, just adopting the existing Commodity Commission authority. When we went back to do it the second time, we decided to actually really engage in drafting a Commodity Commission framework that would be adapted to hemp. So the former director of the Agriculture Commodity Commissions within Oregon and I worked together for about 6 months, drafting legislation and pulling the authority from the existing Commodity Commission authority, the Beef Council, the Wheat Commission, and putting all that authority together into what she framed it as was like the perfect Commodity Commission framework. And of course we had to adapt it to hemp because it's different than a lot of other commodities. But we spent a lot of time drafting the language. It was very, very well vetted with different commissions, with the Farm Bureau, with a lot of stakeholders. And so when we went into 2021, we had very solid language. We made some very minor changes to the language, but we were able to successfully get that. So after 5 years, I was very, very proud to get that one past the finish line.
That must have felt so good after all that time and all of the chaos that was going on that year, especially.
It did. It did. Then we got House Bill 3000. So House Bill 3000 is, I would say, quite notorious omnibus cannabis bill that really still provides a lot of the regulatory authority for both the OLCC regulated market and for the hemp license program. It modified some of the adult use authority. It created new definitions for adult use cannabis item, for artificially derived cannabinoids. It set up a regulatory framework for artificially derived cannabinoids, and including intoxicating cannabinoids, which we'll talk about rulemaking in a second, and also gave us the authority for the Oregon State Plan, and it also included the authority to create a task force to look at cannabis-derived intoxicants and cannabis cultivation and how we were going to handle that. And it was comprised of members from different agencies, from law enforcement, from the marijuana industry, and from the hemp industry. And so we got this mass piece of legislation, and it took a lot of work, but by the end, it was really great to see how everyone that came into the session with very, very different competing interests, we were able to compromise and get to a resolution that actually did cross that finish line.
So you mentioned rulemaking. I want to come back to that piece.
What happened that fall was OLCC went into rulemaking on House Bill 3000. They passed a few emergency rules over the summer regarding the illegal cultivation that was occurring around access to minors. And then we went into a rulemaking regarding artificially derived cannabinoids, intoxicating and not. And while we had set up specific authority for regulating intoxicating cannabinoids in the general market outside of the retail dispensary system, which they already had that authority and were doing rulemakings on that authority, unfortunately OLCC decided to ban these products. And so it was not what we agreed to during session. It was a complete reversal, quite frankly, of the legislative intent, the agreements that we had during session. And we went through a very challenging rulemaking. It was very contentious between the goals of the OLCC licensed marijuana licensees and then through the ODA hemp licensees, what we wanted to see in the market, what they wanted to see in the market, and what ultimately led to very clear and very strict regulations for what products can and cannot be sold in the Oregon general market and what products can and cannot be sold within the OLCC retail dispensaries. And that's the authority that is carried out. Now, some of that authority has been delayed in implementation, and also because of certain bans of certain products, including not only the Delta 8 and those isomers and THCA and things like that, but also even CBN. And that restriction is led to the authority that we most recently worked on.